Today's message is for a select group of people who know they are powerful, but haven't found exactly how they will manifest that power in the physical yet. It's kind of like you're intuitively aware that you possess more than average, so you don't lack confidence. It's just you haven't found the outlet to properly hold that power. There is a strong tie in this reading to water signs. You could have a stellium or a significant placement in Cancer, Pisces, Scorpio, or this could just be a more intuitively guided reading. On that note, be sure to always check the descriptions for more details. A side note about that, a lot of comments, questions I'm getting. The descriptions are not meant to clarify the reading. That is not the intention. The reading is the clarity, and the descriptions are further details. So if you don't understand the reading, the description is not going to make that more clear for you. I get some comments saying they were confused by the reading and then got more confused by the description. I think the first step is to understand the reading, see if it resonates before digging into the complexities of the description. I provide that there for those who are drawn to complexities, not to overcomplicate it for those who want the simplification. My goal here is to hopefully simplify as best I can, but definitely in order of priority, it goes understand the simple reading first, or the hopefully simple reading, and then dive into the complexities that I provide, like the details that I channeled, if you're curious. Who I'm talking to today could feel generally in a state where they are floating without a grounding force upon them. I sense you're kind of waiting to land somewhere. This comes up in a lot of readings, but I think this is going to be the main theme of this one, is you're trying to land somewhere, and that whether it be that a path is shown to you out of nowhere or you discover it yourself, those are kind of the options in your brain, in your mind. I sense you kind of experimenting with new things recently due to this floating type of energy you've been juggling. Something that kind of came through as I said that here is experimentation with cooking, or the significance of cooking as an outlet at this time. For those who don't cook at all and are aware of that, I sense there are a few here. The significance here with that is the awareness around that recently, like perhaps you're desiring to change that you don't cook, or you're aware that you don't cook a little bit more. There's some sort of literal focus around cooking, or bringing together meals in some sort of way. It's being highlighted to me on a very literal sense. But more than that literal sense, I kind of see this being figurative in a way as well. I see this kind of directing me towards something really specific. And this might be where I lose a lot of you, because I think this reading is meant for a select few. It isn't meant for everybody. I'm getting specifics around sloppy cooking specifically, like the really good nanas or grandparents who don't measure and they just like throw things in a bowl with their heart and make the most incredible meals and food. This seems to be a message for a very small group of people who have been very underestimated in their life. I see these types of people maybe getting criticized for being sloppy, like the nanas, or not adhering to perfection standards or measurement standards as a whole. I think I'll get into that as we continue, because that seems very loaded. But this is mainly a message for those who feel they are kind of zoomed out in their perspective, while others are really zoomed in and focused on the details. I see you being uninterested overall in the details, almost bored. I see you also being criticized for being sloppy, quote unquote, whether from yourself or from others. I just see that as like a disconnect here, is there's a sloppiness criticism because you're not zoomed in like everybody else is. I'm more so talking about intuition versus not in a perspective-based way, and I think I'll get into that more. But just for the sake of knowing who this message is for, this is for those who can lean into the details extremely well if they wanted to, but your default state is much more fluid than details give you the room for. The details might often trip you up or confuse you, so you prefer to live in more intuition, and that's gotten you much further, and you've seen much more success with that throughout your life. I feel like I'll give more examples about that as we continue, but I guess just generally, if this message is for you, you're more intuitive and fluid rather than focused on rigid details, then I feel like this message might be for you. Okay, now that we've gotten who this is for out of the way, I think this is the part where we're going to talk about your gifts and how they are underestimated and undervalued severely. I talk about this a lot in my channel because I attract the gifted, but some of you don't feel like you have gifts. And I'm here to clarify that that can't be anywhere further from the truth. The issue here isn't the lack of what you possess, it's more of your conditioned understanding. So hopefully I can clarify that as to why you feel you don't possess any and what they actually are for those who feel they do possess them but don't know what they are. So you are highly underestimated because you present a sloppy motif that others can't quite understand. This is like when you get lost following directions, but you actually find a place that was better than where you were originally going in the first place. That's kind of the general emotion we're talking about here. That's the general thing being presented to me is like you get to a place better, but you're confused and lost in the meantime. While others around you get trapped in useless details that don't matter, you're able to see this larger viewpoint that is critical. I don't know if you're conscious of this because I do think that it's been demeaned or belittled in a way, especially because of how rare this is. It is, in essence, disruptive to society as a whole. People generally will get frustrated when you approach them with this larger perspective while they are in a smaller mindset. So think about it like this, and this is being presented to me. I think it's important. It's like being an architect with a blueprint, a secret blueprint, let's just say it that way, while everybody else is stacking bricks. They think you're careless because you're not focusing on the present task with them, but you're the only one who knows what's being built. It's much easier to settle into the details, to lay the bricks, because in a way, it's a distraction mechanism that is a direct conditioning result of the society we live in. For example, the system we live in, it trains us to focus on the ins and outs of the day, on the laying of the bricks. This is to distract from the larger view that our life is essentially wasted working because we're so mindlessly focused on the task at hand. In other words, focusing on laying the bricks is much less disruptive than asking why we are laying them in the first place. Where I see you being special is like, in this comparison, you're able to not get distracted by these things that don't matter because you almost read the importance of the energy immediately. This is an intuitive gift where you can sense the integrity of the thing and immediately determine the worthiness of a focusing priority. That's why you're able to both focus if you want to, but also be sloppy if you want to. Where others don't have that on-off mechanism, you do. This perceived sloppiness that you are given from society is actually your gift. This is your perspective to be immune to conditioning because you were meant to do something more than just lay the bricks. I see you being able to learn things, this is like a detail coming through, that others couldn't. And you do it more quickly and efficiently than others, but others perceive it as like cheating. You're the type that doesn't really play by the rules. Like, for example, let's say with learning, you'll figure it out quicker and you won't need to spend the structured time, like lesson plans spent reading or hours spent reading to comprehend a concept necessarily. And I think for most of your life, this has been criticized as like lazy, sloppy, when actually it's a true talent. It's a true gift. And maybe that criticism has just come internally because I can kind of see you keeping this efficiency quiet because it doesn't play by the rules, right? Like if you're in a school system and you're doing this quickly, you're thinking you're cheating, but you're really not. You have those gifts that haven't been understood by you or anyone else around you. From what I see is you're basically able to take information at its truest form and digest it sparingly. Based on your discernment gift, you're able to like reserve parts of your brain for more priority and disseminate information in a way others could never. even learn how to do. This isn't something you can learn. This is given to you or not. And I think the reason you don't recognize them as gifts is because the moment you do, the moment anyone does, is society and how it functions breaks. It's dismantled. So instead of breaking society by acknowledging that these gifts are real and that you are powerful, they put you in a box to keep society functioning, to keep laying their bricks, right? To keep being distracted. And so by putting you in a box, you've felt less than by yourself, by others. And I see the lack of societal support in your true gifts has gotten in the way of standing in your power of this path of like floating, of like sloppiness, because those are inherently bad things that we would look at as a society and say, this person is an outcast, right? Because they're lazy and they're floating and they're sloppy. So you could feel throughout your life cycles of floating and then trying to ground. So you were meant to kind of allow floating in a way. And I think I'll talk about that in the main message here. But there's a critical piece here of knowing how you're meant to access these gifts through floating. You kind of already are doing this, I see, but there's maybe an understanding you need to see with how critical floating is to access your gifts or for someone with your gifts specifically. Now, this is the part where we try to make sense of the messages here from Spirit, and we ground your gifts and this floating energy together. But an interesting, really strong energy came through as I was concluding this reading and understanding and discerning the energy here. Is I got this really strong feeling of disbelief from Spirit, like a wait, what energy. And I was sitting with it like confused for a second, like, where is the disbelief coming from? And I'm going to try my best to wrap it in the meaning that's being packaged for me. Is I know I keep throwing the word floating around, but really this is just for the feeling you have where you don't have a path in front of you, right? You're floating and you're kind of surrendering to that unknown. But with the people I'm speaking to today is you're kind of cycling between floating and trying to grasp at something and then back to floating. Or you're in a place of genuinely trying to accept the floating as your state. But this message is to explain why floating is so critical to you and your gifts. But I do sense that this collective here is more comfortable when they're grasping for things. For example, Spirit presented me with that cooking example, both literally and figuratively. I sense that tactile things are helpful for you to release some of the built up energy with the discomfort of floating. You could be focusing on things like cooking, gardening, something to do with your hands, because you're aware this is not your path per se, but being in that floating state is still very uncomfortable. So you're attempting to ground in some way and have control over something, I sense. And I don't think that that's wrong at all. It's being presented to me to explain that to you. With the disbelief energy that's very strong, as I try to conclude this reading, is I think this is the energy for when things actually land for you. And so I'm being given that energy that you'll experience, that feeling you'll experience. And it's explaining the path that you're destined for and how non-linear it actually works and what it'll feel like when you get it. It'll just be straight disbelief. And Spirit is showing me this in contrast to how other more linear paths work, right? Like laying the bricks. Yours is not going to be anything like that. It's going to be very truly out of nowhere, or just looking at everything like, wow, I'm here now. And it's a disbelief type of feeling rather than a slow building over time towards a goal you have in your mind. I think the hard part here is most and a majority of people are detail oriented. They are structured, societally conditioned. And so you're surrounded essentially by evidence that floating is inherently wrong. And this makes you doubt anything will land because you just keep going back to grasp for something because of that doubt that keeps being presented to you through others' experience around you. The feeling of floating is being highlighted as really important to stay in. And I see you're intuitively aware of that at some level. But it's more me explaining it more deeply for you, because things can't be given to you when you're focusing your attention on a goal or a path of some kind, especially when your gifts of higher intuition are so dramatically different from others around you. And I know that that kind of sounds counterintuitive, like, don't we have to work towards something to get something? Like, that's what we're taught, right? And Spirit's answer here is that is only if you know what you want specifically and you're in that bricklaying detailed view. But I sense the collective I'm talking to knows the feeling that they want, but not how to get there, and not like the goal necessarily. And so that's why floating is so critical for you, because it grounds that path for you. It lays those bricks for you while you focus on the feeling. So while the typical collective can lay bricks one by one, it's because they operate from a place of knowing kind of a general structure of what they want, but not the feeling of what they want. And you're the opposite of that. And actually, that's in a certain way more stable than the structure of the bricklayers, because you know the end goal you're seeking and how that will feel. And the bricklayers could lay all the bricks in all the right ways, work endlessly towards their goal. And then they get there and they didn't expect the feeling that they get once it's complete. And they're not happy with it. So truly, your gifts are meant to do something more than just lay bricks. But the hardest step is rejecting the conditioning that's around us. So the message today is to trust that you understand the feeling you're seeking, whether it's intuition or knowing. And that's actually better that you don't know how to get there. That means that you're more clear than those laying bricks, because you know how the laws of the universe actually work. You're working in the correct order of the universe, not backwards. In other words, you're not distracted by things that push us away from clarity. You're kind of dealing with this harder truth space than the bricklayers are, because you're closer to reality and what's true to you. So I think this is where people underestimate and undervalue your gifts, is they think you're sloppy or lazy for not stacking the bricks like everyone else is right now. They criticize your floating, or maybe you even criticize this yourself, truly. But really here, Spirit's message is your gift is knowing which wall is worth building before you waste years laying all the bricks. That's why your path looks unexpected. That's why when things land for you, you'll even say and feel, wait, what just happened? Because that's the laws of the universe. And whether conscious or not, you're operating by the real rules here, while everyone else is kind of just distracted or confused by mindless tasks. This last part is maybe a confirmation to those who already instinctively know to do this, but keep leaving comments. The comments themselves do not have to be anything personal about you. Think of these as energetic nudges. This helps me align to your energy more efficiently and be able to channel for you. And I want to be able to do that. I read each and every one, always. None are missed. None are ignored. I am so thankful for each and every one of you and love you all. So, cheers, friends.